Cadence Dupuis, and this is Busybody Podcast. Today I'm speaking with chef, author, and now powerlifter, Julia Turshen. I'm so excited to have this conversation today. We've been speaking a lot just on messaging. She used to take some of my classes. I'm a big fan, and we had a wonderful conversation. I hope you enjoy it. So thrilled to talk to you. I've been wanting to talk to you about this so long. I almost want to take credit for the fact that I was like, I want to talk to you about your weightlifting. And then like quite a bit later, you wrote that beautiful, beautiful piece.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Like literally, I think I messaged you afterwards. I was like, I was laughing, I was crying, I was like cheering you on.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, it's been fun to talk to you about just sort of, yeah, strength training in general and like specifically women and strength training. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense to me. We started just talking about this immediately.
Well, I feel like there are so many interesting places. There are a lot of like intersections, I feel like, with kind of the food world and
hmm
fitness, in that there can be so many niches, and
hmm
people can really be deep diving and be someone who likes to cook in a super scientific way, or someone who's all growing things in their garden. I mean,
hmm
there, and I feel like similarly you can be a fitness person who's like, I'm an ultra marathon person, or like, whatever it is. I feel like it's almost like a similar mind.
Sure. Yeah.
um I find
Yeah.
like the conversation can kind of be on the same kind of track. um I have so many questions for you. I feel like we have to do like a, how did you come to this? uh just to like get people up to speed. Do you want
Sure.
to give the short version of the story?
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I'll
Because
try to
really
do
they
a
should read your beautiful essay, which we will
well,
link in the bio,
yeah. Well,
in the
thank
show
you.
notes.
Yeah, that goes into all the detail, but I guess the short version is that I grew up kind of embedded in diet culture and grew up in a dieting household, and that instilled in me the idea that exercising was pretty much only something you did either if you were playing sports, like you were an athlete, or something you did to try and make your body smaller. So that's
Mm.
how and why I pursued exercise for a very long time, and developed a pretty disordered relationship to exercise and movement. And yeah, did it for just the total purpose of trying to lose weight. And then, like, yeah, you can read all about my kind of unlearning of that and untangling those kinds of threads. But I got to a point in my life when I realized I didn't want to pursue intentional weight loss. I didn't want to try and make myself physically, emotionally smaller. And I wanted to be less afraid to take up the space I occupy. And I also found when I was thinking about my life, my physical life, my activity, movement, exercise life, and thinking about what are the things I actually enjoy doing,
Mm.
what are the things that help me feel in my body, uh, where are the moments and the places where just feel confident and proud. And for me, the answer to all those questions was when I was lifting heavy stuff. And
Mm. Mm.
whether I was lifting heavy stuff in an exercise class and had learned that that felt good. And then really a big turning point for me was I'm a cookbook author, and I had pressed pause on that work for a bit. And I went and worked at my friend's vegetable farm, which involves lifting a lot of heavy stuff. And I loved it. And I loved being someone who could lift the heaviest stuff on the farm. So when the farm season ended and I was considering, what are ways I want to move my body that align with all the things I'm talking about. I had learned about this thing called powerlifting, which I hadn't known that much about. And I think I first saw it like on the internet, like most people. And then a friend, Molly, who lives in my town, who also is friends with the people who run the farm. So it's, small world kind of moment. Molly had gotten into powerlifting. I knew we lived near each other, so I asked her, what is it? what does it look like for you? Where do you do it? Who do you do it with? And Molly introduced me to the gym I now go to, the coach I
Mm,
now work with. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. It's been a couple of years now of me doing this very regularly, and I love it. And I now compete, which I just do for fun. And it has just completely changed my relationship to my body, to my
mm,
uh, understanding of all the various reasons you can move your body
hmm
and move
hmm.
things with your body. Um, and it's just been great. Yeah. So that's a shorter version. Not the shortest, but shorter.
No,
The
that's
essay's like
beautiful.
60 pages.
It is. It's so amazing. And I talked to Roxanne when I went to your talk with her, Roxanne Gay. That happened like last month or something.
Mhm.
Briefly, just to say, it was so refreshing to have a publication that was like such a long form essay. Like, how nice. That just
Yeah.
doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, and as a writer, it was like just what a once in a lifetime opportunity
mhm.
to get to write at length about something, to really get into it. To be edited by Roxanne was incredible. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Previous to discovering powerlifting, did you think of yourself as a strong person, like just growing up?
I think I did. I think I did, but it wasn't something I leaned into.
Hmm.
I always felt like, I know the following isn't totally true. Often it was true, but I always felt like I was just like the biggest person in the
Yeah.
room when I was in these exercise spaces and these workout classes. I used to go to tons of different classes, and I know it's a podcast and people can't see me, so I think of myself as, and where I see myself on like the spectrum of fatness is like I'm a small fat person. I'm not like a super fat person. So this is, I know that I don't have the lived experience of going through the world with that same amount of judgment and like oppression in all spaces, but including in like gyms and
Hmm.
workout classes. But yeah, so I always felt like I was big. And so what made that feel sort of quote unquote like acceptable to me was that I was strong, and it was like I felt like, oh, it was okay if I was kind of fat, if I was strong, or it made it more okay.
Hmm.
And these were all like justifications and calculations I was, making in my
For sure.
head. And these are not things I currently believe. But yeah, I think I thought of myself as strong, but almost as like an excuse.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but it wasn't something where I was like, Is it okay if I curse?"
Yeah, of course.
It wasn't something where I was like, oh shit, like I'm super strong. Like, let me
Yeah.
go for it and actually see how strong I am and pursue this. It wasn't something I felt like I could be necessarily like proud of or even all that curious about.
This is what's really interests me about our experience in our bodies as women or as femme presenting people is if we were in a different world where women much earlier on were really encouraged in sports. And I've been reading all this stuff about Title IX and how Title IX obviously opened the doors for women to engage in sports, but it also actually basically legislated a lot of um, inequalities where like softball instead of baseball for women and like
Interesting.
smaller courts for women's basketball and shorter sprints and all these things because it really like codified this
Hmm.
gender difference as
Hmm.
opposed to just allowing women to just enter the sports arena. It was like, oh well, now we'll do women's versions of everything and just like shrink things
Hmm.
um and really kind of set in stone that women are somehow weaker. But I think about how what if when you were walking through the halls of your high school, you were getting picked by the coaches for the football team, for the rowing team, for like things that would just people saw your size and was like, oh, I want that strong
Sure.
person. Like that's the person I want. So much earlier, you would have had a different experience of your body. And that's often what young men experience. Someone's like, oh, give me that lanky kid for the pole vaulting. Give me that kid with the wide shoulders for this or that.
Hmm.
But as women, we always have just one place, one box that we can fit in. You're either like, skinny and fitting a cultural stereotype and anything outside of that, now you're just on the outside. You have to constantly figure out how to squish your body into whatever shape to jump back into that box, which is even true. I've been reading so much about professional female athletes constantly are being criticized for being like too masculine. Like they always have to be thin and they always have to be pretty, and they're not allowed to just be like rough and tumble and like whatever. So even if their bodies are super toned, super small, they still are getting all this pressure to like appear a certain way. They're not allowed to just be like sweaty and red faced and cursing and like
Mm-hmm.
have that freedom. I'm just kind of I'm sort of like jumping to more of like the heart of like what I was kind of reading, like what really resonated with me in your kind of experience of this new engagement with your body is like really celebrating what is innate about your body,
Mm.
and finding a place for that as an adult, and like how that has shifted your whole, it's healing and shifting all these perspectives. um because as a person who's in the fitness world, I really have a opinion that I don't think is like rare for people in my field, but it is very rare for people who are in kind of like popular fitness, that like all those classes, I'm going to say a thing that's going to upset people, all those, so I'll do it in a voice, all those classes like spin and bar and like Orange Theory and all these things, that's not really fitness. Like that's just like sweating. It's just diet culture. It's just like a promise that I will change your body.
Mm-hmm.
Low, like dog whistle, weight loss. You're right. Like that's the point of the class. People love spin because they're like, well, you sweat so much. And I'm like, okay, that
That
doesn't,
room's really hot.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, the room's super hot. Like that doesn't really mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't correlate to anything. Um, and it's a question that when I had an in-person studio, we used to ask people, because people would come in, we were in a like a hip spot in Brooklyn, so a lot of people were taking all these classes, and they come in and they'd say, oh well, I've been taking bar for 3 months, I've been doing spin for 3 months, and we would just gently ask them, is it doing what you were wanting? And then
Mm-hmm.
they kind of look like a deer in the headlights, and we would be like, do you feel stronger? Like, did you want to lose weight? Are you losing weight? And then they would just kind of be like, no. And then if anything, they're like, actually, my back hurts a lot. And we're like, okay, so
Mm-hmm.
let's do some real stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, which is to say, I think like, in my opinion, like actual like fitness is like you're learning a skill, you're developing strength, you're developing mobility, you're developing stamina, you are you're working on something. And I think what gets lost in popular fitness, which is something I talk about in my classes a lot, is like no one is teaching you anything in like some random boot camp class. No one is teaching you how to do a push-up. They're just like, now do push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know how to do that, you're just struggling and eventually probably hurting yourself. And like, what is spin? Like I could really rail on spin for a long time, because like what are we doing locked onto a bike that is not challenging us to balance the way you would outside, and like all these kinds of things. um and I will just put a little caveat to that like anything that gets people excited to like move their bodies, great, I'm happy for you. But I do think that a lot of these places do a lot of damage, in that people have experiences like you have had, where you're just like feeling out of place in the room because the room is there. Those people are there because low key everyone is hoping to essentially not get fat, quotations, or lose weight. And so that's like this like tension in the room. And I feel that way if I ever jump into one of those classes, which I never really do, but the few times that I have, it's there's like a performance there, which I think
Mm-hmm.
when you leave that space and you find places like powerlifting, something where you're really like, again, just gaining a skill, like working on a long-term goal, um, there's like this breath of fresh air of like, oh, I can move my body and it can just be about this cool thing that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like weirdly, I have found that in running at this stage of my life, just because we do the run club, and slowly I sign up for races, and similar to yourself, have just been like, oh my God, I like competing. This is so fun. Like I had no idea. And even though running is always like, you know, has a lot of like body image stuff, and I feel like I often quote unquote don't look like a runner, I have found a lot of just like joy in working on this skill, like this random thing, seeing if I can increase my stamina, see if I can just get stronger. Um, so I don't know if there's a question in that. It's just something that I really saw, and I was like, I guess I'm wondering if you have noticed that, if you have pulled apart what powerlifting is from this kind of pop culture fitness
Mm,
world, if you made that delineation, because you're not from the fitness world. So I wouldn't actually expect you to think of that, because I think a lot of people think they're all the same. Um, but that's what I saw. I was like, oh my God, finally she found like a real thing.
yeah. I I don't know. I As you're talking, I mean, you brought up so many interesting things, and one thing that's been on my mind that I didn't have a chance to write about, but I did get to talk about it at the event you came to. And I didn't write about it because I hadn't started it when I turned in the essay. This all probably sounds really confusing. Okay, so I turned in the essay. It was like, I think probably like February 2023, maybe March. I was right after I had competed for the first time in a powerlifting competition, which I did get to write about. And then about a month later in April 2023, so like a year ago, I started a queer barbell club at my gym, which means every Sunday morning there's a big group of us queer folks who work out together in this strength training gym. It started off just kind of like powerlifting, and now it's just I feel like it's like gay hour at the gym. It's
So
become very like
fun.
informal, and it's been great. It's been like a highlight of my week every week
That's
for
so
the last
cool.
year. And it's been on my mind for so many of the things you're bringing up. I feel like it ties into so much of it. But in terms of your question of like, have I noticed this kind of difference of like finding powerlifting for me and kind of how did it feel? I feel like maybe I'm just trying to connect the dots in my own lived experience that don't necessarily need to be connected. But I find a big parallel between finding powerlifting and coming out as a queer person.
Mm, mm,
Um, by which I mean, I feel like before I don't know, this is like a separate thing. I never had like I don't know, a quote unquote traditional coming out. It was like a little bit more nonlinear for me. But basically until I met Grace, who I'm married to, my spouse, we've been married for over a decade, and told everyone in my life about Grace. Basically, up until that point, I think I had been as if I was going to all these different exercise classes and stuff,
mm,
trying to kind of do the thing other people were doing and just
mm,
feeling like I don't feel like everyone else in this room.
mm,
And then when I started to kind of really lean into my queerness, I had experiences where I was like, oh, I'm starting to feel more like myself. Like
mm,
this is who I am. And then I met Grace and I was like, oh, this fits. Like we fit together. And I feel a little similar with powerlifting where I was like trying for decades to make myself, my body, my behavior, my patterns fit into this
mhm.
um I don't know, routine of exercise that just I just didn't feel right. And I was trying and I was like, getting the right outfit and the
Right.
gear and stuff and it just wasn't me. And then, eventually when I did find powerlifting, I was like, oh, this fits me. And whenever I talk about powerlifting, I always try to go out of my way to say like, I don't think powerlifting is for everyone. Like I think a lot of
Yeah.
people would hate it. Um, my experience powerlifting and the reason I like to share it is because I like sharing the story of finding the thing that fits for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that thing exists for everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be exercise. Like, I don't care what you do with your
Mm-hmm.
body. Like, I want you to feel as comfortable and as peaceful in it as possible, just like human to human. For me, I find that in lifting a barbell. I think some other people do too, and it's nice to meet those people and like geek out over
Mm-hmm. Totally.
powerlifting. That's part of why I like going to competitions and competing because lifting is such a personal kind of quiet thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a great coach. I started the queer barbell club at the gym. But when I'm actually lifting, it's just me. It's not like a team sport. So it's fun to go compete because you get to meet all these other people who are as excited about it as you are,
Totally.
which is just really fun. Um, But yeah, I definitely see that parallel and that feeling to me, that like finding that thing that fits you, that makes you feel more like you. Is just, it's a great feeling. And I feel very grateful to have found it in my body with this particular kind of random sport.
Yeah, totally. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think, I mean, what I'm hearing you saying is basically if there was like a how to or something to take from that, it's like lean into what you already are, you know, find
Yeah,
that
I think,
and
yeah.
move towards it.
Yeah, I think like not fighting your body to be
Yeah.
something it's not, like finding the thing that makes you feel good. I think finding the thing that feels fun to you, like I have a lot of fun lifting. I mean, that might sound really weird to people who are like, it looks miserable, but I think it's really fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things people do with their bodies that look miserable to me that they find fun, including running.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Exactly. I mean, as someone who enjoys being strong, I definitely can understand that. There is a place in your brain that you go when you're lifting heavy things, and it's a fun place to inhabit and
yeah,
kind of experience.
absolutely. I like that place a lot because it's for me, it's incredibly quiet and kind of
Mm-hmm.
empty.
Yeah, totally.
Whereas like in the rest of my life, there's usually I always feel like I'm like a computer screen with like all the tabs open.
Mm-hmm.
Like I live
Mm-hmm.
with like a lot of anxiety. I juggle a lot of things in my life. I do a lot of different things. But when I'm lifting, especially lifting heavy, like I cannot be thinking about anything else.
Exactly.
I can't even really
Exactly.
be thinking about every part of the lift. I usually focus on one thing. Like I was benching yesterday, bench pressing,
Oh, I know.
and I was like just thinking about my feet and like
Right.
the way my feet were pushing into the ground. I wasn't thinking about my arms. I wasn't thinking about my grip,
Mm-hmm.
like nothing. All I was thinking about was my feet. Which is like the furthest thing away from the bar in that moment. But you know, that's literally all I was thinking about. And to me, that's such a pleasure to go to that place where like everything else gets so quiet.
I love that. I mean, I could just nerd out with you on that. I find I've never thought of myself as someone who can run long distance. Um, and I'm training for the Brooklyn half now, just out of curiosity. The
Yeah.
curiosity just keeps going that I'm like, oh, I didn't think I could run a 5K. Oh, then I thought maybe I could do a 10K. Now I'm like,
Hmm.
maybe let's see what else can happen. And I have noticed that it's like kind of something that I appreciate about running, which is also what's so terrible about it, is there's always a point in runs or races where personally I always have like some kind of spiral. Like I just suddenly am like, oh my god, this is terrible, everything is terrible, and my brain goes way down, and I really
Hmm.
feel this sensation of like I have to just dump everything and just come back to this like quiet brain. And
Hmm.
it is this really wonderful experience. Like I can kind of feel myself start to spiral, and then I just start to like offload. I'm just like, nope, we're just
How
clearing,
how do
clearing,
you do
clearing.
that?
I find a different place in my brain.
Okay. Like, is that something you're like just kind of silently telling yourself, or do you do that
Good
just
question.
I'm just
I
like
think it's
curious because
two, yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's two things. I think there's a physical sensation, like a mental physical sensation that I'm looking for when I'm like, because I've now experienced it enough times to be like, oh, I can get through that dark spot.
hmm
So then I kind of look for that other quiet spot where I'm like, no, 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 let's literally take the train off that track and go onto the
hmm
other track. And I will, and I now, and this is something I say to clients all the time, like you have to give your nervous system experiences of literally getting through things or different things so that
hmm
you literally have physical memory, and that is the confidence like that. So like
Sure.
now I can be like, oh, I will get through this moment. And so I just actually I follow this ultra marathon woman who's like 37 and always wins everything, and she's just like totally amazing. And she has a saying um where she says it's going to hurt and then it's going to hurt more, and that's what she tells herself, because she does runs where like she literally hallucinates and like she goes blind from her eyes being open for so many hours
That
and like
sounds
did something crazy.
rough.
I don't even understand. She was like, she won a race recently where she had 30 more miles to run and she took a 1 minute nap. And she was like, the 1 minute nap really gave me the energy to keep going. And I was like, I don't understand that at all. But
I have some concerns, I'm just gonna say.
I
But
mean,
go
those
on.
ultra people are what? I don't
Yeah, I'm
even.
always like, what are you running from?
Yeah, I know. But she seems very happy actually. And actually, what I really like about her is she has no training schedule plan and no like she doesn't go like, "Oh, I eat special whatever." She's totally intuitively like everything out every interview she's like, I strap on my shoes and some days I run for 5 miles and some days I run for 50 miles. She's like, I
Hmm.
just figure out how I feel, where I
Hmm.
want to go, and I
Yeah,
just
that's kind
go,
of
and
cool.
that's what my body wants to do that day. And that's basically how she goes into these runs. She's like, I just go and see what happens. And she just
Hmm.
clearly naturally has some pretty incredible ability. But and she says she has interest. Her interest is psychologically like getting through these intense
Mm.
situations. So
Hmm.
then here I am running these like way shorter from her. Like not I'm not running several days. I'm running like 45
Yeah,
minutes.
I think that's very reasonable.
But I will use that phrase sometimes because I do a lot of trail runs in the summer and there's crazy elevation and they're just hard. They're just like
Hard,
really
yeah.
hard and it's hot. And I'll just say to myself, it's going to hurt and it's going to hurt more. And then it helps me in a way, you like lean into the thing that you're resisting.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, I'm just here. Like, this is just what I'm doing right now.
Hmm.
And I'm going to get through it and it's totally fine. And like, I find that really calming. And that's part of like the dumping of all the voices. You'll never, you
Sure.
should stop, maybe you should just walk, oh, does your knee hurt, like that can just go away because I'm like, it's just hurting and it's just
Hmm.
going to keep hurting and then it will stop, like I will be done with this.
Yeah, I don't know. What you just said really sticks with me, the like leaning into what you're resisting, because I feel that,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm,
know, just quite literally when
mm-hmm.
powerlifting. And yeah, like emotionally too and stuff and learning. Yeah, like squatting with like a couple 100 pounds on your
For
back
real.
is a pretty wild thing to do. And just knowing that, I guess a few things. Like I feel like if you're powerlifting safely or just weightlifting in general in a safe way, like you're going up incrementally. So you're not doing something that, like, yeah, you might not be able to lift it, but you're not doing something that's going to put
Right,
you in a super scary position. If I think if you're approaching it like soundly. Um, so going into something that's really heavy and not being quite sure I can do it, but knowing I can probably do
right,
it
right,
is like that's kind of a cool feeling. And um yeah, like I'm thinking specifically about squatting because it's like you're pushing, you have the weight on your back, you bend your knees down, and then you have to like stand back up. So
then
you're
you're just stand
pushing
back up,
against this
yeah.
thing. And that moment, I mean, it's like a few seconds, it's not even a minute, but just like pushing through that feeling is, it's really hard to explain what that feels like. And having this trust, a big thing for me is learning, getting into like such a granular thing, but it's like it's the smallest tilt forward that I do that's
Mm-hmm.
like changed a lot for me in my squat. And I used to think if I tilted forward, I was just going to fall forward with
Sure,
all this
sure.
weight on my back. And learning that little tilt forward helps me get up out
Yep.
of out of the hole is what we call it when you're at the bottom. Um, and learning that I can trust that little tilt. Like I can go a little bit forward and I'm not going to fall on my face.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and kind of like leaning into that pressure. It's just, yeah, it's been cool. And I think sometimes when I don't think I'm thinking about it consciously, but there are moments like it just outside of the gym in my day-to-day life where it's like, yeah, something feels hard or difficult or challenging. And it's like, yeah, I can lean forward a little. I'm not
Yeah,
going to
totally,
fall. I'm going to
totally.
get back up. And yeah, you have that lived experience in your body and it really comes through in other places.
100%. I feel like that is like the gift I would give anyone who feels like I can't exercise, it's not for me, I don't like it, is it can be this beautiful metaphor that really does make like a one-to-one connection to other things in your life.
Hmm.
And like it sounds so cliche, but it's true. I mean, you're literally like pushing a weight off of your back. What metaphor, or like being brought down with all this weight on your shoulders and you push it back up, you
Hmm.
stand back up. What a beautiful
Yeah.
image, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
wrote about in my essay, but something that's on my mind often is, yeah, this kind of emotional impact powerlifting has had on me. And I just
mm,
feel a lot calmer and like more confident and less needy of a lot of the types of validation.
mm,
I mean, I still look for and ask for.
Sure.
But just it's th that kind of stuff has lessened. Whether it's like, I don't know, like I see it in my professional life, just I mean, I take what I do seriously, but I don't know, I think I care a little bit less about the
Sure.
kind of like superficial stuff. Like my cookbooks, I want to enjoy making them, like I want to enjoy training, but just as like I don't care how I place in a competition, I'm like, I don't care as much if they like how many books I sell. Like
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
feels less important to me
Mm-hmm.
than it used to. And personally, like I feel like I used to ask Grace, my spouse, for just like a lot of confirmation about my like appearance and
Mm-hmm.
like basically like you're attracted to me, right? Like that kind of question.
Right.
And I just do a lot less of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I don't know if it's like a one-to-one correlation with powerlifting, but it's definitely coincided with powerlifting and just having a lot more kind of like inner confidence. And when a couple times a week, every week, do this really like hard thing
Mm-hmm.
and trust yourself to do it, it has like ripple effects.
Well, I think what you just said too, you trust yourself to do it. I think anything when we do something physical and you kind of show up for yourself, you have these little wins, these like multiple little wins, whether
Hmm.
it's lifting the heavy weight or running the distance or whatever it is, doing the
Hmm.
yoga class and being like, oh my God, I could touch my foot or whatever. You have these little wins and that adds up and that gives you this kind of like bank of like I can do this thing. I can
Yeah.
do hard stuff. And then you can be like sitting in traffic and being like, I don't know, this is okay. I'm
Yeah,
okay.
no, totally. No, it kind of like, I mean, this sounds really like woo woo, but I'm like, yeah, it like does something to your nervous system. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like really doing these, things with my body has really helped me as someone who lives in my head pretty often.
Yeah.
Just realizing like they're not two separate things.
Yeah,
Like they
totally.
they are connected, it turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I have this funny question.
Hmm.
Something that stood out to me, and this is totally like my own bias too, but I was like, part of your journey, it's like you're being coached by this young guy, this like
Hmm.
who seems like a delight. But I was just like, oh, this is so funny. Like you're in some ways your deliverance is by just like a cis white man. And like, did that was that part of that for you at all? Like was that a surprise to you in any way? Because as someone who is like a cis hetero white lady, I am not a
Hmm.
big fan of men. And I don't seek out their help very often.
Mm,
But I have had delightful, just like hetero white men in my life who have,
sure. Yeah, there are
been
some.
supportive. Of course, yeah, there are some, and I just think it's really. I thought it was just really interesting and kind of this funny thread that like you're like out, you're in this like fat liberation kind of voice, um and then like there's just this like dude bro behind you like
Sure.
helping.
Yeah. Interesting. I've never kind of stopped to think about this in the way you're asking. Yeah, Matt is my coach, my friend. I don't think I thought much about it when I started working with Matt because, um, sorry, what?
I'm sorry, I'm pouring my tea.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I don't think I thought about it much when I started working with Matt because I didn't, know of any other options.
Right, there's no other option.
Um, yeah, my friend Molly, who I mentioned before, was like, this is the gym I go to. We live really close to each other, and the gym is like 25 minutes from where we both live. And I would say if it weren't for Sport of Iron, the gym I go to, the closest like powerlifting specific kind of strength training gym, something comparable, is like over an hour away. So my options were kind of limited,
Yeah.
and Matt owns the gym. Yeah, and he's my coach. And then there's like one other guy, this other sweet guy, Zen, who is a trainer at that gym, but he doesn't do specifically powerlifting. So I didn't even know at that point there were like online coaches. Like that's how a lot of people do
Mm,
powerlifting. They have like virtual coaches and they like tape themselves or tape. I
mm.
sound really old. They like
Do they
use
get
their
out the
phone,
VCR?
make a video. Yeah, they get out the camcorder. And, their coach will make like a plan for them and then they
Mm.
send them video and then they review it. Like that's how a lot of people do it. I didn't even know that was like a thing. So I was interested in this random sport and there's like one gym and one coach where I
Right,
live.
right.
So I didn't think much about it, but I will say one conscious thought I've had is Matt reminds me a lot of my brother, who I
Mm.
write about in the essay. And my brother and I, just for a little context, I have an older brother, Ben, and we had kind of a rough childhood. And a lot of my stuff with my body and weight and stuff kind of was born from that relationship and just
Mhm.
being I felt very like judged, and then there was like a lot of like physical abuse. And Ben and I are really great now. We've worked through a lot of stuff, and the essay was actually like a kind of really beautiful moment for us. Anyway, I digress. Matt reminds me a lot of Ben. So
Mm.
having this guy who reminds me of my brother, who I have this very like sweet relationship with, and I feel so supported by Matt and so safe with him and taken care of by him.
Mm.
um, that has been really wonderful. So I think there is like a connection there. And
Mm.
yeah, one I didn't pursue intentionally. And sure, I think on paper, like if I had a choice between coaches in my area and one was like, I don't know, an awesome fat queer woman or
Right,
something, I
right.
probably would have been like, yeah, it'd be great to work with her. But I'm so glad that I work with Matt and it's been great. So yeah, interesting question.
I
I
just,
don't know.
yeah, I think about
Yeah.
it too because there's in the essay you brought up to him right away. You were like, I don't want to talk about weight loss or anything,
Hmm.
and also there would have to be some comfort with your body physically with working with him and being looked at and all that kind of stuff. And that's something as someone who trains people, like that's the whole thing. Like when I was first starting and really would just say yes to every single client, uh, there were definitely male clients we had that would only work with female trainers. And
Mm.
whether some ways that was because they didn't want to be emasculated in front of a male trainer that they couldn't do push-ups in front of, but also sometimes it was like a gross thing where they just wanted a cute the girl being like good job.
Yeah. Gross. Yep.
um so, and it's something that I think about when I reach out to a practitioner.
Hmm.
I have someone who works on my body who's just like a random white guy, and I'm always surprised that he's great. I love him, but he is a total goofball, and sometimes I have to school him on the way he talks about things or
Yeah.
something. But he's very talented, so he works very intimately. That I do structural integration, which means you stand in your underwear in front of a practitioner and they basically look for asymmetries and then you
Sure.
lay on the table and they fix you. But you're
Yeah.
literally like, look at my body and tell me what's wrong. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
I've been to a guy like this. It was
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's great. But again, yeah, if I could work with someone who looked very different or was inhabiting a different body, that would be uh, interesting. But it's funny when you can get healing from people that are in a way symbolizing a group of people that's very harmful. So
Yeah. I think it's yeah, again, I haven't thought much about this, but I feel like it's great. I
yeah,
think it's great to if you find that, I think it can be a very great experience. And I would assume from both sides. I mean, I can't speak for Matt, but I'd be curious what he would say
yeah,
kind of on the reverse of these questions. But yeah, I don't know. I love working with him. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's also fun. I always tell people, I think when you come from a non-sport background, which it sounds like you weren't playing sports as a kid, and I was like a theater kid growing up. I think sometimes like we have our own biases of like, oh, the jock person, I won't have anything
Mm.
in common with them. Like, I don't want to talk to them, whatever. And that can come also from a place of hurt. Like I got made fun of by those kids. So I like, oh, I'm a grown up and I'm too cool for them. And
Hmm.
now I love like having these kind of not even friendships, but like acquaintanceships or whatever with like people that I'll see at the run races over and over again that are like, I'm not hanging out with them, but I get to nerd out with them about
Hmm.
stuff like, oh, are those your shoes? Like, oh, those are cool. Do you like them? Like, like all these like dumb, what electrolytes are you using?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
that I
No,
would just
yeah.
like never.
Shared interest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I played sports when I was a little kid and I loved it. Like through like elementary, middle school. I went to sleepaway camp every summer when I was growing up, and like I played sports the whole time. I basically stopped when I got to high school when everyone got like very competitive.
Mm,
And I just felt like I mean, it was in my head, but I just felt like I wasn't thin enough, fast enough.
mm-hmm.
I think there is something wrapped in there about like queerness too, where I just felt like
Sure.
being on like an all girls team, not that there's anything like wrong with that, obviously, but I
Mm-hmm.
just like felt like I was like, yeah, I feel different. And I don't at that age didn't quite totally get it. And it just made me uncomfortable. And then yeah, to do sports, to work with a trainer is as you were kind of talking about before, like it's incredibly intimate and very vulnerable. Like you're doing the stuff with your body and like you're seeing what
Yeah.
your body can do and in response to what other people's bodies are doing with team sports and all of that just felt like too much for me. So I
Yeah.
checked out around then. But yeah, getting into like a competitive sport in my late 30s has been cool. It's been like yeah, very healing for that younger version of me
Mm-hmm.
who I think would have loved to keep playing sports in high school and I kept myself from that.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, and trying other hobbies and stuff too. Like I keep joking that I'm like totally in my jock era because my car is like a locker room. Like I've got in the winter I have my ski stuff, I have my pickleball gear, I have a softball mitt, like it all lives in my
That's
car.
awesome.
And I do all these like I live in a rural area where people I have all these friends who like to do all these different activities and I'm always game. Like I'm like, yeah, I'll try whatever. And um every time I do, I feel like it's just like another hug for my like 12-year-old self who had to like run the mile for school and just couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so every time I show up with friends or at a to play pickleball or something or go to a powerlifting competition, I'm just like, I'm just here to have fun. And that feels really good.
That's awesome. Can I ask, did you go to private school, private high school?
Hmm.
Me too. Did you, this is like also like a thing that I've been thinking, and if it's totally out of left field, just be like, I've never thought about that. um, I feel like I'm Jewish also, and I
Hmm.
feel like when I was in school, I was really subtly aware. It wasn't anything explicit, but I did not feel that I was the same as my peer group because they were really basically waspy. They were really
Mm.
like the skinny. They always called them the J. Crew girls. Like
Hmm.
one, I couldn't fit into J. Crew clothing. They never could fit over my butt.
Hmm. Hmm.
Pants. Um, which something has changed. Remember how Michelle Obama got really into J. Crew, and I literally was like, "How does that work? I've never been. They don't fit over my like Jewish butt." And ever since she got into them, I can fit into J. Crew pants, and I swear to God, they changed something.
Something's changed. That's so
They were
funny.
like, "Oh, let's make this sizing work for people who don't just have legs that end at their lower back." Um, but I feel like it has taken me till first of all, like one moving to Brooklyn, I was suddenly like, oh, I feel my people, but I didn't really know what that meant. And actually, literally, since the pandemic, I moved it down to Coney Island, which is basically like Eastern European.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm like, oh my God, these are my people. And then they're like mainly Jewish. And here I'm wearing my leopard print sweatshirt. These ladies are out here every day with their curves and their leopard prints and they're like they dress really big and they're also always exercising. That's like such a big part of that culture, but they're like squishy, like they're just all bodies, all ages. They exercise every day. I see them all out at the beach. They're out all winter exercising. There's these big ladies that as soon as it gets sunny, sit out with their shirts off, with their big grandma bras. They're like big
Hmm.
satin bras and their huge boobs, reading the paper together.
Love it.
And I'm just like, these are my goals.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
um, and I wonder if that was part of your experience of feeling like the all girls like lacrosse team or whatever didn't suit you,
Mm.
because I remember those girls and like I
Hmm.
couldn't run as fast as them either. They were taller than me, they were leggier, and I didn't feel fat, but I felt I definitely was very aware that my butt was like way bigger than them, and I felt, yeah, just this general sense that I didn't fit, which later I realized was really kind of like an ethnicity thing. Like I
Oh,
felt,
interesting.
I, yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
experiencing anti-Semitism, but it was the same. I was on the outside.
Yeah, I hear that and understand it, and also went to high school with the J. Crew girls, so like I really get it. But I don't think, yeah, that wasn't really my experience. I definitely, the private high school I went to was like for sure waspy, but um I feel like my like yeah, Jewishness wasn't something that actually set me apart there, and it definitely didn't at
Mm.
the summer camp I went to. Um yeah, so that wasn't my experience, but like I get that. And I think what I felt a difference in around sports specifically was the kids I went to school with. I felt like there were people who lived in the community I went to school with whose like families grew up there. Like there was like
Mm.
generational kind
Mm.
of legacy,
Mm.
and there were kids who, yeah, played whatever sport because their parents also played, and they're, like they grew up in a community where that just like was the thing people did.
Yeah, unquestioned.
Yeah, like, and sports, like I definitely did not grow up with like squash and lacrosse and stuff, like kind of waspy sports. And yeah, my mom's, we all have our own relationships with our bodies. My mom has hers, and it's been complicated, but she was like a runner and she played tennis and stuff. Like she's always
Mm.
been pretty active, but my dad wasn't. But for my mom, that was like a total digression from her family. My mom's like first generation, and like, yeah, her parents weren't playing sports. They were like just trying to make a living,
Yeah.
and get by. So like I don't think I have in my uh just in my family, I don't have like the legacy of generations of people who have had all this leisure time,
Yeah.
the kind of time I do to like, go play pickleball whenever I want and that kind of thing. So that definitely felt like a difference for me at the school I went to, where I was like, oh, these families have been playing tennis together for their whole lives, and they've been, doing that kind of stuff. And that just wasn't really the case in my family, I guess.
Well, I feel also like so much of the pressure because my family also had a lot of dieting behavior, and like certainly my mom's family is like to this day, it's like the first thing everyone ever says is like, oh, you look good, and like all, it's all
Hmm.
visual and all this stuff.
Hmm.
And my mom's had a really difficult relationship with her body, and doing a lot of reading about um, where thinness for white women comes from and the racism behind that and all that stuff. I started to really read that as my grandparents' generation essentially trying to fit in and
Yeah.
erase their ethnicity and erase
Hmm.
the curves and look like these leggy J. Crew
Yeah.
girls. And that's really what everyone is saying. Oh, you look good. Oh, you fit in. You
Yeah.
can pass. And
Yeah.
I have clients who are in their 80s who are Jewish who will say things to me like, "Oh, you can pass," and I'm like, I don't know if we live in a culture anymore where I like need to pass,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
like that's still really present to them, and they're all obsessed with being thin. And it's something that I think about anytime I feel critical of my body, or if I feel like I don't fit in with runners or whatever, and I'm just like, these are just constructs, and these leggy people got access and it was encouraged, and Jewish people have also been super athletic, but less prominently for um, in popular culture because of who controls all of these things.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the history of like anti-fatness is just the history of white supremacy and
Exactly.
racism and yeah, and then you bring
Exactly.
class into it and everything. So,
Exactly. Because also when I was reading your essay, I was wondering, I sometimes wonder about how we're all classifying fatness in all these different ways because I worry that we're still speaking in a binary of thinness or fatness, and that in that we're erasing other identities like athleticism or like
mm,
being a strong, curvy Greek person.
hmm
And when I, like, to be perfectly honest, when I saw you and met you in person, I was like, you just have a super Jewish body type. You've got big boobs and skinny arms and legs, in my opinion. And I was like, I don't think that she's fat. I was like, I see a powerful, athletic person who has a naturally strong, wide body. Like,
hmm I
um,
guess I hear you. I guess I hear under that a little like hesitation to describe someone, whether it's me or someone else, as fat, as if that's like a bad
I know that's
thing.
what I worry. I don't want it. Because I that's like why I haven't been able to figure out how to write about this or talk about this because I that's what it's going to sound like. But I wonder about I don't know what is accuracy. Does it matter? I don't know. I worry that if we're all under patriarchy and white supremacy, then we are still describing ourselves basically within that structure of either acceptable or unacceptable, but now I'm proudly in this, or I'm like I'm leaning
Mm,
into this.
hmm
And I don't know, I just have been thinking about it. I have a client who keeps describing herself as fat and all this stuff, and I have seen her in a bathing suit and all these things. And like the other day I was like, can I just say I don't think that you're fat, not in like a you can't be, but I was like, I'm literally just confused why you're calling yourself that. Like, do you not fit in straight sizes? Because you're like a very small person. And like,
hmm
I was just like, what do you mean by that? Because all these things, and that was an interesting question for her too. And I don't know, I think we're at this interesting moment of like what started as the body positivity movement, where now we're in this kind of fat liberation place, and then I wonder if we're also kind of losing some nuance of just like allowing our bodies to be whatever our bodies are, including just like a strong, curvy, athletic person, or I mean, I have a friend who's 6 feet tall and like she's a very large person. She's also not a fat person. She should have been a linebacker. She's just like a beefcake. But I think a lot of people would describe her as fat because they wouldn't know how else to describe her because she's so big. But
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like I've gotten to a place where I'm like, there's nothing wrong with fat, and it's just
no.
like an adjective, but obviously it's not because it's so loaded and I don't know. I hear you on like if we're limited, if we live under white supremacy and we're limited to like the tools of white supremacy, one of those tools is language. And so we don't have maybe all the words we'd like. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think about that so much in when it comes to like queerness and gender and stuff and
Yeah.
people like including my spouse who is non-binary who just wants to use their name, but will use like they, them, because like the word for what grace is doesn't quite
Mm-hmm.
exist,
Totally.
and we're limited to these words. But then also I think having using the words we have and reclaiming them where we can, like the way the queer community we've,
Mm-hmm.
reclaimed the word queer. I think the same kind of goes for fatness. Like, I don't know, I wrestle with this too. Like I feel like I wish there were other words, but if we're using the words we have,
Mm.
I want to just have a sense of either pride or like neutrality in them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that's tricky.
I see that. And then it becomes exactly in the ways queerness, it becomes really political to use those words to reclaim them. And then we might come to a point in another 15 years where the words shift because we don't need to like re-own them in quite the
Yeah.
same way.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, the queer kind of trans parallel, I think is important because yeah, it'd be great to live in a world where we didn't need any labels and we didn't need
Yeah,
any terms. But until we live in a world where everyone has the same rights and the same access to healthcare and just, you
yeah,
know,
exactly.
good treatment, which extends also to fat people. Like in many states, it's legal to discriminate against people because of the size of their body for like employment and
Mm-hmm.
housing. I mean, it's literally like it's legal to do so, which is crazy. Um, a fat person getting on an airplane has a much different experience. A fat
Exactly.
person going to see a show in a theater has a much different experience. But most importantly, like fat people are so discriminated against in medical settings. So until we live in a world that is, I think, accommodating of
Mm-hmm.
everyone, like
Mm-hmm.
I think the words and the labels do matter. But yeah, it'd be great to live in a world where none of that mattered. That's just, I don't think where we are.
Well, thank you. That's really beautifully said. That helps me
Yeah.
clarify
Yeah.
how I've been thinking about these things
No,
as
and
well.
it's, I mean, all this stuff is really hard. But it's hard because, I mean, not to like get on my soapbox, but it's hard because like the people who want to hold on to the power they have made all of this hard.
Exactly.
Like so like all of like I feel like, it's that thing of like, yeah, the system's not broken, the system's working as it was intended to, which is to keep like a very small group of people in power.
Yeah, I just interviewed Kate Mann, who wrote
Hmm.
Unshrinking, which just came
Hmm.
out, and there's a
Yeah, it's
beautiful
an
quote
amazing
in
book.
there.
Hmm.
Yeah, that says insecurity is not an individual problem, it's a societal issue.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think about that now all the time. Just like anytime that you're feeling like shit, it's not for we really get fed that message like you have to do a mantra to like feel better about
Hmm.
yourself. And it's like, look outside it. What is making you feel that way? That's
Yeah.
the issue.
1,000%. Yeah. Yeah, that book is great. Yeah.
Um, well, my last question for you is
Hmm.
really an intersection of what I think is really lovely about everything you do in the food world, which is really like joy and kind of playfulness.
Mm.
And I think a lot about creating a space for what I call adult playtime,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, which I just think we really lose. And if we can cultivate it, it's so important. And I think that's the joy often of competitions. I really read that in your essay. Like all these things, getting our outfit ready and
Hmm.
the nerves. Like, when as an adult do you get to do that unless you
Yeah,
kind of take part in these things, which, like, in the big scheme are joyfully meaningless, right? Like, you're not
exactly.
getting sponsored by Nike. They're not going to
No.
drop you if you like don't win or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, so it really is all
Nothing to lose. Yeah.
fun. Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
fun. Even the excitement and the nervousness and the like, can I do it? It's all part of that fun. And I see that also just in the way that you present food and um, cooking in this really like, let's have fun with this.
Hmm.
It's really free form. It's like, what do you have in the pantry? How are we going to use up this like can of whatever?
Hmm.
Do you see that parallel, or is that something that you are thinking about, or is that something that you notice that you're like, oh, I can bring this same attention or like carve this same space?
Yeah, I don't know that it's something I intentionally or again consciously like think about, but I definitely think I'm at a moment in my life where seeking out joy and play feels like a priority for
Mm-hmm.
me. So it makes sense that it would show up in different parts of my life. Um, and I don't know. I don't know if it's like getting older as we all are every single day. I think also COVID, just this sort of
Totally.
like collective experience um of loss
Mm-hmm.
and uh and and seeing how broken our response systems are and stuff. I also feel something that feels very I mean, this is like a longer thing for another conversation, but something that feels very intrinsic to my Jewish identity, and my family is just being very aware of death and talking about it.
So
And
that's super Jewish.
yeah, and I also, thanks to Grace, who took this course, I learned about it, and I last year became a certified end of life
Oh,
doula.
wow,
So
cool.
I basically am just like very aware of death and am not that scared of it, like being around it or thinking about it. And because I think I live with that kind of on the surface and not like buried deep down, I just feel very like, yeah, life is short. Like, why not have fun where we
Hmm.
can and
Hmm.
play as much as we can? And those are the moments when I feel my most free and happy. And so, yeah, I want that as often as I can with the people I love. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
What would you say to, I have so many clients that are afraid to cook because they're like, basically they're afraid that they'll mess up in some way.
Yeah. So what?
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
what I say. Good.
Yeah. Like, okay. I think it's also like, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I think, yeah, just going a little easy on yourself. I think something I hear myself like repeating to people all the time is like, you don't have to put everything you eat on social media. Like, not
Hmm.
everything you eat has to be like the best meal you ever had. Like, there's a lot of joy in really simple food. Like, I this morning ate, yeah, because I wanted to get outside and mow the lawn before we spoke. And I knew
Hmm.
I had like a limited time. So I like put a piece of we have this like raisin pumpernickel bread I really like, and so I threw a piece in the toaster and put cream cheese on it, and I was like eating it while I was mowing,
Yeah,
and it was
nice.
so good, and I was like, oh, this is so delicious, and it's like, no, I would never write a recipe for that, like,
Right.
but it's like I had so much pleasure eating this piece of toast, doing this
Hmm.
thing I love, which
Hmm.
is going on my riding lawnmower, and
Hmm.
that was great, you know. So I think just giving yourself a little break, and I feel like being scared of cooking can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, it's being scared of not being like in control because like
Hmm.
cooking is, you know, things happen, things change. Um, and I think being a little more relaxed about that would serve a lot of people.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Um, and also I always tell people most of the time when you quote unquote mess up, it still tastes good.
Yeah.
Just didn't look
Yeah.
like the picture.
Yeah. Just put like a little more salt,
Exactly.
sprinkle, like squeeze a lemon. It's going to be fine. Add more cheese. It'll be
Exactly.
totally fine.
Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Julie. I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk finally.
No, me too. I know this
Such
was
a
like a long
joy.
time coming. We went back and forth, but this was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.